Hello everyone! It's the FMX once again, and that means I'm sitting down with acting teacher Ed Hooks, and we have already done like 2 or 3 interviews, or even more, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, true.
So if you want to learn about acting basics, you should probably watch one of the previous interviews that we have already done, because today we're going to do a deep dive into other topics.
I hope.
And yeah, actually, let me ask you, there's a panel at the FMX this year that you are taking part in. What is that?
Well, we're doing a lot. As a matter of fact, at this whole FMX, there's quite a lot on intellectual property.
Yeah.
And I've been curating one of the panels on this, on creating, developing, and protecting your intellectual property.
Okay.
And we have a legal analyst from Khartoum Brew, Brian Gabriel, who's come over, and he's going to be talking about copyright law, intellectual property. And you know, it's one of intellectual property is one of those things that animators, a lot of animators, they sort of, their eyes will roll up in their head when you start talking about this, but there's just nothing that's more important to your career than controlling your intellectual property. And we're now in a digital age. I mean, everybody knows everything. The information is really hard to hold on to, and it's really easy to steal. And even sometimes people don't even mean to steal, and they're stealing. So it's this is a subject that we're going to have to address, and I'm very pleased to be in this FMX. In addition to doing my Acting for Animators workshop, I'm also involved, one of the program organizers on the intellectual property track.
So what do you think is like the most important thing that an artist has to know about intellectual property?
Well, let me tell you something. The word artist originally came from the word artisan.
And
what
does that mean?
An artisan is somebody who makes something. And when you make it, then you're going to sell it.
Yeah.
Because this is how you make your living. The thing that you make.
Yeah.
You make a pot, right? You make a sculpture.
Yeah.
And then you sell that. You're an artisan.
Yeah.
And the word artist came from artisan.
Yeah.
And you have to make a living. Now, in times in history, there have been sponsors. Remember, in the Renaissance, you had the Medicis. You had people that took care of the artists and gave them stipends. And they didn't have to go out and sell their work. They had, their overall life was taken care of, and then they were paid to create. So we now are in a different, we're now in a digital era, and it's just very difficult to hang on to your property. And so animators really have to think sort of like entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
In this era going forward, there needs to be an entrepreneurial spirit.
Okay.
And what that means is you got to take care of yourself.
Yeah. But isn't that kind of like an old problem for artists that you partly, at least a lot of artists who say about themselves that they're artists, I think they say that money is not the most important thing about this. Money is not the reason why I do it. Yeah, what do you think about this duality of commercialism and art?
I certainly agree that money is not the most important thing, but I also know from personal experience that you have to eat. And unless you want to sleep under a bridge, you got to pay the rent. So somehow or the other, your art needs to pay.
Yeah, I see that. Food and rent is certainly a good point.
Animators in many ways are, like actors. My background is in acting.
Yeah.
And you know, in the beginning, there was no Screen Actors Guild. There was no American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. In acting, I think it's interesting that this parallel. There always were stars. Yeah. And stars were always very well paid. And it was the other ones. Yeah. It was the ones on the bottom that were interchangeable, because in acting, as in animation, you have an imbalance in supply and demand. Yeah. You have more applicants for jobs than there are jobs available. Mm. And this is getting worse, I want to say. I'm looking for the word. Is it worse? Is it better? But it's but the situation is becoming more set. Is that because the schools are turning out so many animation graduates, the marketplace is rather flooded with animation, what I call animation technicians. Mm-hmm. And so you have an imbalance in supply and demand. So somehow or the other, we have to create a middle class, a middle income group. Uh-huh. And because animators really don't have a union, animators are going to have to sort of take care of themselves. Uh-huh. Want to stop?
Yeah. What do you think are some of these ways that animators can take care of themselves? Like, what can they set up to secure themselves?
Well, some of this I'm going to find out my own self. But I can tell you this, is that when you have a project that you're working on, a short animation, whatnot, you need to think bigger. You need to say, okay, what might happen with this? Does this have the potential to turn into anything else? Could it be turned into a game? Could it be turned into a book? Could it be turned into a comic book? Yeah. Is it possible there's something here that could be developed for a television series, something on the internet? I mean, some ideas don't lend themselves to a lot of development. They are what they are. And okay, so you register it, you copyright it, and you're good to go. But some ideas, you look at them and you say, boy, this has a lot of potential. Mm-hmm. All right. What do you do when you have such a thing?
Well, what do you do? Yeah.
Well, I can tell you that you cannot protect an idea. Uh-huh. That's a fact. The copyright laws do not protect ideas. Okay. You can't just say, you know, I've got a really great idea about the star-crossed lovers, and they both die really early on. You can't protect that. Somebody is going to take it, and if they think it's a good idea, so you need to get it down. Uh-huh. But this requires a certain kind of thinking, because you're working on an immediate project right here. Yeah. And what I'm suggesting is that you really have to look further down the road. Mm-hmm. Look down the highway and say, well, what's possible down there? Is it possible that around the next bend, where I can't see right now, that there might be trouble or an opportunity?
Okay. For example?
Well, you might get the idea that this might make an internet series. Okay. For example, there's a lot of that going on right now. Yeah. You can raise money on Kickstarter. I mean, there's a lot of things happening. See, today, you know, I've mentioned this to you in other interviews, but it's really an important thing. Animation industry is changing. Mm-hmm. It's moving away from Hollywood. Hollywood is in the business of theme parks and branded toys. Yeah. To the degree that they come up with movies that also tell wonderful stories and have wonderful performance and meaningful stuff, then that's just great. However, that's not what they're there for. They're there to make money. They're there to raise their stock price. They're there to justify their $60 million a year salaries, and that's what they do. And what I'm saying is that the industry is changing, and we're now at a place where animation as an art form is actually, even as long as it's been around, is still a baby. It's an infant.
Yeah.
And it's been mainly used for commercial purposes. So when I walk into a classroom these days, I'm looking at the next generation of animators. And these people are not only going to have the opportunity to tell original and creative stories for adults, by the way, P.S., for adults, but they also are going to have to be aware of their intellectual property. They're going to have to take care of themselves. They can't just float around and be creative. They're going to have to be entrepreneurial.
I mean, what I do like about the aspect when you say you need to get stuff down on paper, only then you are able to protect it. I think this also helps against procrastination and like putting ideas off. Like, you know, I have this great idea. I'm super sure it will work. I'm going to do it one day and then it will be great and it will work and I will make my living with that.
Yeah.
But I find it interesting that with this, if you really want to secure that idea for yourself, that you actually need to start working on it. I think that's an interesting aspect.
We should talk sometime about work habits. I think that would be, work habits. You just mentioned procrastination. And one day we'll have to sit down and talk about that because people have different strategies for what happens when they get a block. And all those, I mean, it's just an interesting subject. We've all got our ways of moving along.
Yeah. So let's make a little sidetrack. Let's talk about that right now.
Okay.
Just a little bit. Like, I mean, the term writer's block is, I think that's the one that everybody knows, but I think everybody also knows from their own experience that as an animator, as an actor, you can also get these blocks.
What I do is I walk away from it. I've also learned, I've learned that I write best in the mornings. Okay, I've learned that almost everything that I write after about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, as brilliant as I may think it is, tomorrow I'm going to delete it all. I'm going to look at it and say, what talentless person wrote this. It doesn't matter. There's something about my brain being fresher earlier in the day.
Yeah.
And I find that, and also when you're creative, it's you tend to, when you've got a spark of something that you're working on, you, for me anyway, there's it's almost. It becomes contagious. It's a self-fulfilling thing, and I tend to go in a huge burst, and then I'll stop. And when I stop and look at it, and I say, "Oh, I should start revising this," a lot of times that's the cue for me to get up and walk away.
Yeah.
Go do something else. Go for a walk. Go out to lunch. Go do something. Change my mind. Go sit and read a magazine. You know, play words with friends or whatever.
I mean, it's interesting that, you know, a huge part of this is knowing yourself and getting to know your way of thinking, your strengths and weaknesses, and ways to bring out the best in yourself. And you can only do that when you listen to yourself, when you listen to your body, when you analyze your habits and your day and how things going.
I also work best on deadline. I do.
Under pressure.
You know, so even if I don't have a deadline, I often will give myself one.
Yeah.
If I've got a project and it's something I'm working on and there's no deadline and I sort of work at it a little here, a little there.
It gets never done.
No, it can take a long time. It can really go, you know. So, but it's a really interesting subject. Yeah. What to do when you're blocked, and how people's work habits are. What to do. I find it's not a good time when you're trying to be creative. It's not a good time to be drinking wine.
Yeah.
You need to. I find that stay away from anything that might slow you down. And
I heard that about alcohol and things like that before. Like that people think that they're super creative on it, but when you later look at it, you need all your power in the head.
It's also true of acting, by the way. Actors, movie actors, stage actors, you learn not to drink or do any kind of thing that because you tend to with actors it's high stress working in front of cameras in front of hundreds of people, and you feel like if I have a glass of wine it'll settle me down, but actually it slows your responses. And so you think you're wonderful and you're not. You're not.
So listen to yourself, observe yourself, to get these things straight. Really interesting topic. Let's think what else is there to talk about. I mean, maybe with regards to the FMX, it's a big event also diving into the new things that are going on with virtual reality and games. Did you already have a chance to work in games and to work?
I work with game
virtual
companies.
reality and
I work with game companies all the time. I just only a few weeks ago I was in Warsaw and teaching for a company called CD Projekt Red, who has a game called Witcher.
Oh, Witcher, I know that one.
And great studio, terrific studio. And but I work with I've worked with many of the leading game companies. Games are interesting because they have a different aesthetic. Some game developers are looking to have a game that's all action. And some game developers want to have a game that causes the player to experience emotion. Well, with games, So with games, it's important to understand that you cannot empathize with yourself. So therefore, a player cannot empathize with his own avatar to the degree that he can control the avatar. In other words, if he says go right and it goes right, he says left and left. If he says shoot this and pull that back, then to the degree that the avatar is responsive to you, then the avatar actually is you. And therefore you cannot empathize with it. So the trick here is to make the avatar sort of have a mind of its own. And also to create among the NPCs, what they call the non-player characters, the ones on the side, they often are wasted in many games because they're just wallpaper. They've got, and nobody's doing anything with them. But if you give the NPCs actual things to do, then your avatar can play off of that. And you're not actually controlling your avatar when it's doing this, when it's responding to what's around it. And to that degree, you are able to empathize with your own avatar. The other thing with video games that's going on right now, industry-wide, is that cutscenes, the cinematics,
mini videos that interrupt the gameplay.
And they're going away. So, and the reason they're going away is because people are playing games on smaller platforms and for shorter periods of time, for 5 minutes here and 10 minutes there, and on smaller stuff on iPads and little things, even on cell phones. And the cutscenes don't work too good on these. And so a lot of the better game companies are looking for ways to move the function of cutscenes to plot points, introduce characters, etc. To move the function of cutscenes into gameplay. Okay. Now, in order to move it into gameplay, the level designers have to know about acting. And the level designers heretofore have primarily been designer, programmer people. And so they now are having to expand their skill set. And that's one of the reasons when I teach at game companies, they often give me level designers to work with.
Okay.
And that's the reason why. It's a very interesting topic, all the video games, because they do have a different issue than movies and TV shows, when a different aesthetic altogether.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also some possibilities that maybe aren't discovered yet, or that aren't used as much as they could
Sure.
be, because it's still relatively
Sure. And also you mentioned virtual reality. I mean,
that's super new.
Sure. The first time that I had what you call a tour of virtual reality was at Valve. Because I've taught there several times, going back to when they were doing Half-Life. But they have, in their studio, they have a virtual reality lab that's pretty state-of-the-art. And they were the ones that introduced me first to virtual reality. The challenge with virtual reality, if you want to get into it, everybody knows this. Matter of fact, on my IP panel that I have here at FMX, Shaska Unfeld is going to be one of the people on the panel. You've
Film
talked to
Academy's,
him?
Alumni.
Huh?
He's a Film Academy alumni. We interviewed him, I think, in 2013.
That's right.
Amazing guy. Yeah.
Yeah, he's quite talented, and he's spent some time now at Pixar, and he's working on the Oculus Story, developing story for virtual reality. And so he'll have some things to say about virtual reality on the panel. But that's the big challenge. I keep saying about virtual reality that it's going to change the world. It hasn't yet.
Yeah.
But largely that's because the headsets are still bulky and still mysterious looking to the average guy on the street.
Yeah.
They look at that and they think somehow their eyes are going to get too much X-rays if they put this on. And they don't want to put it on. And the ones that they're giving out at Jack in the Box are toys. They're not really good they're not really good stuff.
Yeah.
So I think when the headsets get to be about the size of Ray Charles's glasses,
good measurement. Yeah. I see.
I think that's when you're going to see things really start happening, because your average person will no longer be afraid of them.
Yeah.
And then there'll really be an incentive, a monetary incentive for people to be developing content.
Oh, what I think is interesting about virtual reality is at the moment the pace that it is changing. I feel like in one of the very first FMX where we had virtual reality, it was just demo. It was just like, here, now you are in a dinosaur nest and you can see your dinosaur mommy. Isn't that cool? And it reminded me of actually one of the first animations, Gerchi the dinosaur, which is basically also just a tech demo. Like he's interacting with but there's like no all the sophisticated story stuff that we have today. It's not happening there. And it reminded me of these first steps of animation that we now see as first steps in virtual reality. And then in the year after that, we had the first games where I felt like, okay, this was not just translating a game into virtual reality and, it's just additionally virtual reality. It's games that were only possible in virtual reality. One of the things that deeply impressed me was one of those, I forgot who it was, but one person said in a presentation, like, think about how long we needed in film to discover that we could cut. Like they didn't cut in film for years.
That's right, D.W. Griffith.
Yeah, and until he cut, and then people realized, this is working. Like you don't get disoriented. It doesn't make you sick if you do it right. And yeah, basically the philosophy is we haven't discovered the cut yet in virtual reality. We're going to discover something that will be so obvious when it's there, but nobody is doing it.
You know, I posted on my Facebook page not long ago, I found an article which was very interesting that was presenting the idea that Alfred Hitchcock was a pioneer in storytelling for virtual reality. And they cited in this article the movie Rear Window.
Rear Window? Okay.
If you recall, that's the one with James Stewart in a wheelchair because he's got a broken leg. So the whole thing is in one room. And he's looking out the window, and he's got binoculars.
Yeah.
And so he's looking at the apartments. He's in New York, and he's watching the apartment building next door.
Yeah.
So in different apartments, there's different things going on. And he witnesses a crime. And he's trying to piece together what's going on. It's a good paradigm for virtual reality because the player is in a fixed position.
Yeah.
They're not moving around as you would in conventional filmmaking.
Yeah.
It's really something to think about. Because I found storytelling in virtual reality is a big challenge. And a lot of I have friends who are really smart people who are struggling with this and trying to figure out how to do it. And I mean, here's the thing with storytelling is that when you tell a story, especially in film, you as the artist are telling the audience what to see. You're saying, now you look at this, and now you look at this, and then you look at a close-up, and you see this guy's expression, and now you do a far shot. Now, take a look, and on the cut to a picture of the ship in the distance, it's getting closer, and cut back again now to the guy's face. So you are very controlling as a filmmaker, and it's the same with a stage play. Shakespeare was very controlling. Now, with virtual reality, the player doesn't have to look where you don't want him to look. Where he doesn't want to look, he can disagree with you. And so what do you do about this? How do you go? How are you going to surmount this and still have a story that that a storyteller is trying to tell? I mean, I remember one, as a matter of fact, I think it was here at FMX a few years ago, there was somebody presenting about story in virtual reality, and I went to the presentation, I sat in the audience, and after it, they had Q&A. And this guy was, I'm not even going to tell you what company, it was a big company, but he was talking about the struggle of how to make story. And he was saying about how much progress they were making. And I said, in the Q&A, I said, okay, look. I said, so you are Shakespeare, and you have an idea for a play about a guy named Romeo and a girl named Juliet, okay? And in your idea, there's going to be a scene that takes place on a balcony. And she's up there, and he's in the bushes, and you've got this. And I said, now in virtual reality, you have an audience of one. Now, what are you going to do if the person, your audience of one, does not want to look at this scene that you want him to look at on the balcony? What are you going to do? And his answer to me was, well, some stories don't lend themselves to virtual reality. That was his answer. And I said, so in virtual reality, Shakespeare is just out of luck. I said, is that what you're telling me? And he said, well, we're working on it.
Oh, it's at the very beginning of things. Okay.
You see? So it really is the beginning of things. It's very early. It's a baby.
So I think a lot of the examples of storytelling I saw, it was basically like a stage. And then only stuff was happening like in the left side of your virtual reality. And you had to look there, because if you looked away, on the other side there was nothing. Like there was just background. Where I think like, this is not...
Well, also you can come up with a bumblebee that's flying around, and it flies off over here, so you have to go watch it. And then,
oh, what's going on?
But
Google did some good stuff with that. Yeah, the Google stories.
I mean, you can trick the player, the viewer, into casting their eyes to the left or the right.
Yeah.
But really, we have to come up with a better way for telling a story in virtual reality than flying bumblebees around. You need something more than this.
Yeah, sure.
And that's what they're working on right now. I think that idea about Alfred Hitchcock is a good one. I like that a lot.
And that works very well in this movie. Yeah.
I remember years ago, there was a play that was being presented in Los Angeles, and it was Tamara or Tamara. I don't remember which the pronunciation, but they didn't stage it in a theater. They staged it in a house, and the audience was limited to the number of people that would fit in the living room. And what it is that in this play there was a crime that had been committed in the house.
In the house.
And you could get up from your seat in the living room and follow whoever you wanted. You could follow the maid, you could follow the wife, the husband, the little kid. You could go, and they all had things they were doing. Okay, but all of them had some knowledge or some limited knowledge or some piece of knowledge about the crime. So, and one of them did it. One of them was the villain.
Yeah.
And so you could see this thing 8 times and get 8 different perspectives on the same story, because you could get up and walk and follow whatever was happening. See?
That's amazing.
And I thought that was a good idea for virtual reality.
Yeah,
that
totally.
Because then the player can go where they want to go.
Yeah.
And
they don't feel too limited. I mean, they cannot leave the house, but why would they? They want to figure out what's going on.
They can't leave the house, but each character, and some of the things the characters know, of course, would be incorrect. Because people presume things, about crimes, about and eyewitnesses are very unreliable. And so you have, it would be it's a good device. I think it's a good device. And I think it also goes with the thing of Rear Window. Yeah. I can see similarities. So you and I, sitting here right now, have created storytelling for virtual reality, and
we're on the forefront.
And I think we need to protect our intellectual property.
Yeah, that's right. Have you ever played pen and paper games?
Not really. I'm a game player. My games have been board games. That chess. I used to that type of thing. I'm a boring player, actually. It's funny because I teach at these game companies, and which is so sophisticated, and I don't really play the games. I can look at a game and tell you what's wrong with it, and I can help them fix it.
Yeah.
But I'm not a good player. Maybe I'm too old, but I don't have the patience to play them. So.
Yeah, we don't have to. Do you know what pen and paper is?
No.
It's the name of a genre where one person is the game master, and he prepared a story, or let's say he prepared possible scenes that can be visited and possible people that can be met. And he made himself notes what players could find at these scenes, what personalities the NPCs have. And then it's just people sitting at a table, and they can build their character. Like one person can be a wizard, one person can be a knight, one person can be whatever they want. and they have stats. Like they have to say like, okay, I'm a knight who's very strong. I have a lot of strength points. I'm a wizard. I have a lot of intelligence. And then the game master throws them into situations. Like they said, you're talking to a king. The king tells you about a dragon that is somewhere and that he will reward you. And then the players can react. They can talk to the game master, who is taking the role of the NPCs and is answering in character what the king is saying to them. And they can freely decide where they go. They can say like, oh, we want to go to a blacksmith first. And if the game master didn't plan for a blacksmith, he has to make one up very quickly. And this is the genre of pen and paper. And of course there are rules for like fighting. You have to work with the stats that are given to you. The game master cannot just say this is working or this is not working. He has to roll the die. And say like critical success or critical hit or whatever. Or
how long does a game last?
They can last pretty long. Like the last one, the session that I play are like 4 to 5 hours.
45 hours?
4 to 5 hours.
4 to 5.
And then you play like, well, the last game we had 2 sessions, so it was 8 hours in total for one game, for one chapter of my game.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, it's very, I mean, I'm embarrassed that I'm not even, it sounds like it sounds like a game for actors because there's a lot of improvisation. Yeah, a lot of improvisation there. So it sounds like fun.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And it kind of is virtual reality. You have ultimate freedom.
Yeah.
You can go wherever you want and discover a world. And I just think this is really exciting times. I think one thing to note here is also that this is opportunity for jobs. Like you don't, like when people learn animation, I think a lot of people are like, I want to become a Disney animator. I want to become a Pixar animator because that's the things that you saw that maybe got you interested.
Yeah.
But nowadays there are a lot more possibilities, and in virtual realities there are possibilities that people cannot even name.
Well, there's different business models, there's different production models, especially here in Europe. Because many of these movies, they'll have a budget of 10 million euro. And they'll pick up part of the financing from France and part of it from Sweden and part of it from England and part of it from... And then they use animators in each of these different countries, and they'll set up a virtual studio, and they'll have the main production office be in Seville, Spain, and this production model is different from your studio like Disney or Pixar, where you have brick and mortar buildings and everybody goes in and works there. They have a desk and a chair and a computer. In this new model, really, you can make a movie for not a lot of money. It's a matter of if you got an idea to do it, and if you you can get the talent together. I've talked to you before about the movie Boy and the World. I love that movie. And it's from Brazil, and it cost $500,000 US, and it was made by 15 animators. I think that kind of a movie, that kind of a production model is really what today's young animators are moving into. They're much more likely to get into those kind of situations than they are to get a job at Pixar. I mean, Pixar and those companies, they're actually laying off people, pulling back. They're outsourcing things. I think that entry-level animators today need a different kind of a skill set beyond their animation skills themselves. They need to be looking at the industry and production models, business models, things like intellectual property, things they're developing when they're making a short animation for a show reel. Is this a short animation that could be entered into festivals? And if it is entered into festivals, is it specific enough to where somebody cannot steal it? There's all these considerations. This is the generation, this is what they're coming into.
Yeah.
I spend most of my time trying to be helpful to this group of people because I don't think there's anything I can do to help Disney. Disney, I mean, really, I don't care much about theme parks. And I understand that there's what they're doing, but there's not much I can do to help them do it.
Yeah.
But there are people that want to tell stories and want to think of animation as an art form. And I want to work with them. That's who I want to work with.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's an important thing, you know, to pick your interest, pick your specialty. I think this is... sometimes we also need to be aware that this can change. And we need to keep an open mind to find those directions that, you know, life and art and my personal voice could develop into.
I tell you what I see as a challenge in the European model of production of these business models, where, like I said, they pick up financing from France and these different countries and then piece it again. The challenge is that in their concepts that they will try to come up with something that they think will attract the production money. And a lot of times the production money is coming from governments. And governments are only interested in getting their money back. If they're going to invest in something, then they want to find a way that they can get the value of this back, if not in real euro, then in kind, in increased employment, in something. But they're not interested in the storytelling. The governments themselves, the people who are coming up with the money. And so filmmakers who want to develop projects, they should be thinking about story. They should be thinking about the audience and who they're communicating with and whether or not this movie is going to be entertaining and useful. Is it helpful to people survive in the world? And it's very easy for the people, the producers, to get off track of that and to start thinking about, okay, if I put this in here, I can get more people from Germany. And so that's the challenge.
Yeah. It's probably, as I try to generalize this a little more, like a thing that a lot of films or like any creative work has is like that there are two factors. Like there's a factor that comes from inside, from what the storyteller wants to tell, what the animators want to do, what is good for the film.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes when a film reaches a certain level of planning, there's stuff, or a story, there's a point where the story tells you that it needs to develop this way. And then, on the other side, are like outside factors. There are producers who would like to have the film a certain way because then it will sell better. And, you know, to a degree, you need to do that because you want to eat. And it's difficult to keep...
It's difficult. But this is what today's new animators, the entry-level animators, this is what they're coming into. Animators 50 years ago did not have to think about this stuff. They only had to think about, how can I get a job at Disney?
Okay.
You see? And
would you say in a way that Walt Disney, talking about the original Disney films, that he kind of figured that out, this balance?
He was brilliant. I have a theory that today's animators are in a parallel kind of a situation to the same one that Walt Disney was in 1935. When he was doing Snow White, when he decided to make a movie out of Snow White. You got to remember, there was no precedent. And Hollywood thought that Snow White, they actually called it Disney's Folly, because they did not think an audience would sit still for a feature-length cartoon. At that time, all the cartoons were used as curtain raisers for feature-length live-action movies. They would show a cartoon, then they would show the movie. And Walt Disney said, no, we're going to have a feature-length cartoon.
First one?
And people said, you're going to lose all of your money.
Yeah.
And he said, well, we're going to not only just make people laugh, we're going to make them cry.
Good goal. To take all of this a little bit full circle, I want to come back to acting. And I have an acting question that somebody actually asked last year. They're now getting the answer this year. This is how it can go. Namely, if you have to animate or act a character that is completely against how yourself are, how would you go about this? How would you plan to act such a character?
Well, the first step is to be very happy that you've got such a character to work with.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's always much, it's actually not nearly as much fun if you're animating a character that's like yourself. You want characters that are different. This is true also of actors on stage and in movies. You're looking for characters that are different. The first thing is to realize that every character, every human, is the protagonist in his or her own life.
Yeah.
So this character, although this character is not like you, this character considers that he's a hero.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so whatever the character is doing, the character is kicking puppies down the stairs. You have to find some way, as awful as that is, to understand why this person is doing this. You need to get your judgment out of the way for a moment and say, why? Why does this person, this character, think that this is a good thing to be doing?
Yeah.
Why is this a survival strategy? You've got to allow your character to do what the character does. Your job is to find out what the character's values are. Emotion can be defined as an automatic value response.
You respond with your value. You behave.
That's right.
Depending on what your values
Fear, happy, there's 7 core emotions.
Yeah.
They only had 5 of them in Inside Out. So emotion is an automatic value response. We've all got the same, every human's got the same basic core 7 emotions. There's many thousands of feelings.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, you may feel, for example, like you're in love, and you say, well, that's an emotion, love. It's actually not. It's a combination of a lot of things. So, but there's 7 core emotions. But what makes one person afraid is not the same thing that'll make another person afraid. What makes one person happy is not the same thing as makes another one happy. But all humans are acting to survive. So if you've got a character to play that is very different from you, you must respect that character.
Yeah.
Don't play that character as a loser. Nobody thinks they're a loser.
Yeah.
Losers think they're winners.
Yeah.
Villains don't know they're villains. Villains think they're heroes.
Yeah.
And that's how to play characters that are doing things that you in life, you say, well, I would never do any of these things. Well, the character does. And the character is a hero. Yeah. Even if the character is doing despicable, awful things or crazy things.
Yeah.
This has to do with that character's survival strategies.
Yeah.
And you have to allow it. If you're a stage actor, a movie actor, then you have to embody it. You actually have to take it over and let it speak to you so that you now behave in this way. It's sort of like hoisting a different flag up the flagpole than the one that you wave every day. You put a different one up there. Animators are able to do this with more objective distance. Yeah.
It's just, it reminded me of, you probably don't watch it, but The Walking Dead, have you heard of this series?
Sure.
It's so, like, it brings out the survival aspect of so many people because it is survival in the zombie apocalypse. And at the moment, there's this one character, Negan, who his survival strategy is incredibly cruel. But he is 100% thinking that he's the good guy, and he calls it saving people. Like that's what he calls it. Even in the name of saving people, he's doing unspeakable things. And the best moments are when this actor is saying stuff with a lot of compassion. Like, there are those moments where he is like doing the most cruel things, and he's looking people into the eye and saying, I'm so sorry. And he really means it. It's so insane.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, you've got the Joker.
Oh yeah.
Is a good example of somebody with,
Absolutely crazy, but yeah.
Well, but characters have their own. Some people look at the world upside down from the way you do.
Yeah.
And you really, we're all the same. Humans are all the same. And any character that you have is really the same. It's just, it's got his different value structure and is doing different things. So you just have to understand, you try to empathize with what the character is doing. Find the character's emotions and then let the character instruct you about what to do. They'll tell you what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. That is an interesting thing, that some stuff comes from the character. Because as soon as you have the framework up, the character is telling you what to do. As soon as you have the framework of a story, the hero's journey might tell you what should be coming next.
That's right.
Okay. Wow, I think we touched on so many topics. It's like amazing. I can't even remember.
I hope you can edit this.
We will see. You just have seen it. Maybe last but not least, tell us about your books that people can read from you.
Oh, well, I have the 2 books right now. The 4th edition of Acting for Animators, which is it's a revised edition. It has half a dozen analysis of feature films in it, scene by scene, time coded and everything, so that you can follow along and you can get, it's like an acting class. So it's that's in there. And I think the book is the best one that I've had, the 4th edition. So my other book, the second book, is Craft Notes for Animators, and the subtitle is Perspective on 21st Century Career. And in that one, which also, by the way, has some movie analysis, I make the point that I was making with you a moment ago, that I think that today's animators are in a situation similar to what Walt Disney had, in that there was no precedent for him when he made the first, when he made Snow White. There wasn't a marketing department. There wasn't somebody to tell him what to do. In fact, everybody was telling him he was nuts.
Don't do anything.
That's right. But he said, no, I'm going to do it. I'm sure I'm right. And I think today's animators, what they face a choice. They can sit here and try to get a job over at Disney or something, or they can do what Walt Disney did. They can say, okay, what kind of stories do I want to tell? And how can I make it work?
Yeah.
So that's my 2 books that I have right now, and I hope everybody will go out and get them. And if there's questions, they can always contact me. I'm on Facebook, by the way, and you can come and friend me.
Yeah, do that. Feel free to follow Ed. He's posting very interesting things. And thank you very much, Ed Hooks.
You're the best, Ferdinand. You're the best. You really are.
Yeah, I enjoy it every year. And maybe because this year didn't work out from the community, we didn't get any questions yet. So if you have questions, write them in the comments down below, and I will bring them next year. We'll do it that way.
That's it. Bring them. Let's do it.
Awesome. Okay, and also thanks to the FMX, which allows us to do these interviews and to meet these amazing people. And stay tuned for more interviews.
Bye-bye.